Hello, friends, and welcome back to Light Channel Denmark, and especially welcome to you, Brother Kurt. Last
Thank
time
you.
you were with us, you were sharing about nutrients deficiency, and today you are going to share about something which many of us have not heard about, and that is how to detox with iodine. Before I give you the platform, can you please share with our viewers how did God show you how to do this?
Well, I just say that I've always had a passion for natural medicine and just trying to understand how the body works. And I have my background is in engineering, but on the job, occasionally we have some opportunities uh, to incorporate biology into our projects, and so it just encouraged me to study more about the body, in addition to the biology for the work that I do. And I would just say that with that, um, I have had the opportunity to help people. It's just the diagnosing, it's just that desire to want to solve a problem. Some of it is engineering based. I think a lot of it's just a passion, and I've just reached out to friends with the little bit of knowledge that I have, and God has blessed in many ways to help some of these individuals recover their health.
Mhm. Amen. Sounds good. So please share with us.
Okay, so I'm going to be speaking about a topic here that's called iodine. And pardon me while I just get a few notes together here. But iodine is a very interesting mineral. Iodine happens to be one of the many elements of the periodic table, and as human beings and scientists that we know of, that plays an essential part in our world. And so iodine happens to be uh, atomic number 53 on the periodic table. And what does that mean? That just simply means that there are these many elements on the table, and they each have unique properties. And iodine happens to be uh, a- an element. It's a semi-lustrous element. It's a stable halogen, and it has 53 protons and 53 neutrons and 53 electrons. And being a halogen, it just simply means that it belongs to uh, a special group on the periodic table, and that group is called period five, or actually period five, and it means that it has in its outermost electron shell, they call it the valence electron shell, a missing electron. So, in order to be a very happy, stable element, um, it would need one more electron. So there are several elements that fall into this category, and iodine is in there. There's also uh, fluorine, chlorine, bromine, and then there's iodine in this halogen list. So with it having 53 protons, it has a very, very specific role on the Earth and in our bodies. And the fact that it has 53 neutrons is just a property that's very common to elements. But you could change up the neutrons a little bit. There are ways to, and also there are other iodine elements out there that don't have 53 neutrons that match those protons, and those tend to be radioactive. And you find them a lot of medicine where clinicians and physicians are using these radioactive forms of iodine to do diagnostic studies and contrast with various imaging technology that is available today. So, so anyway, iodine is very special. It's also the heaviest of the halogens, and it's a very large molecule, and it has a radius of 140 picometers. Oh, what is a picometer? Picometer is 1 times 10 to the minus 12 meters. So it's a trillionth of a meter. Let's just say that. Um, so there are some foundations of chemistry that involve iodine, and I think many of us who came up through high school, I'm not sure of the various schooling systems around the world, but here in the States, most young people who took chemistry, mostly inorganic chemistry in high school, would have come across iodine, and specifically a form that we call Lugol's. And so Lugol's iodine is an iodine that's really composed of two types of iodine. We call it iodine, I-N-E, iodine, and then iodide, I-D-E. And the IDE usually comes from potassium, but it does something pretty special to compounds that are being studied in the lab. And so, if one was curious to know if the element that they had in their test tube was a complex carbohydrate, well, they could put this yellow orange pigment, well, yellow orange chemical, which is Lugol's solution, which is in iodine, right? They would put it on their complex carbohydrate and it would turn from yellow orange to black blue. And so that black blue would be an indication that there is, in fact, a carbohydrate present. But the indication came from iodine. So it's very interesting how iodine has been able to work. So if you were to put it on an element or some other subject in the test lab that was not or did not have a complex carbohydrate, it would not change color. It would just stay its original yellow orange type color. So, so anyway, that's a little bit about the inorganic chemistry and biology with respect to iodine. Something else very interesting about iodine is that it also forms very strong acids. Now, we don't generally encounter these every day in society, but the body nonetheless does use iodine in various ways, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But one thing I wanted to mention here is that um, iodine is, we mentioned that it's very important. And I'd just like to share with you a few things regarding iodine's importance in the body. And then we'll come back later and we'll look at some deficiencies and so forth. But iodine is a very, very necessary mineral for thyroid metabolism. And without iodine, we begin to have lots of problems with metabolizing even just carbohydrates. I mean, just a process, very simple process in the body called glycolysis, and even respiration. It helps the brain stay sharp, and it also protects the body from toxins. And I think that's part of what we're going to look at here today is toxins and detoxifying. Why we should detoxify and why maybe consider iodine as a mineral to do that with. And then also, iodine helps protect from radiation. You might recall that after the meltdown of Fukushima, which was a nuclear power plant in Fukushima, Japan, there was the race to secure lots of iodine. People all over the world, even folks on the western coast of the United States and Washington, California, they saw sales of iodine kind of skyrocket for that little period several years ago after that reactor, which was hit, if memory serves me correctly, by a tsunami, caused damage, structural damage to the facility. And so as a result, they ended up having this reactor that they were not able to keep cool. And and many people sacrificed their lives in the Japanese population to help bring some type of cooling to that reactor before it melted down and would cause an explosion that could, create injuries all over the population. So iodine is recognized as retarding radiation, and you could just look it up. So iodine is also a natural antiseptic. I remember years ago when I was a kid that we had some in the house, and my parents, when we had some bad scrape or burn, would put iodine on that sore, and it's very powerful. It doesn't hurt too much. Maybe at first it stings a bit, but that's what it's there for. Iodine is also a very powerful antioxidant. It has the power some people regard as the power of vitamin C, that many people regard, but it does a lot of good things in the body. And also, it retards from free radical damage. What else does iodine do? It ensures reproductive health. Um, if we have time, we may talk a little bit more about that later. But iodine is a very, very necessary mineral. Um, and I mentioned here that in terms of women, iodine is even more important because a woman's body is more complex. And maybe this is just my opinion, but it's more complex than a man's body because of the delicate balance of hormones that are produced by the female anatomy. And, and so much so that God designed it in a special way to, to regulate itself in a monthly cycle between these hormones, progesterone, estrogen, and women even have a little bit of testosterone and luteinizing hormone. And so that delicate balance enables a woman to conceive and become pregnant. And so her body is super delicate, and and iodine, as it has been found in the last couple of decades, uh, likes to reside even in breast tissue. And so, women that are deficient in iodine may have a higher propensity for developing breast cancer. And they generally say the larger the breast, that the more iodine is needed to counter those free radicals and potential for cancer to develop. Same thing goes for the uterus, fibroids. It's been discovered that a deficiency can lead to uterine fibroids and uterine cancer. And so, while that may not be the complete cure, uh, it has been shown that there is a link in terms of deficiency and the development of these types of cancers, uterine cancer, and the production of these fibroids. And hair loss. Hair loss is one. It's not the only mineral. Unfortunately, our bodies are more complex than just one mineral sometimes, or one nutrient that controls everything. But certainly, iodine plays a factor, even in hair loss. What else can we say? Iodine maintains strong teeth and bones, and iodine helps stabilize the mood. And I'll just take it a little bit further than even mood. Um, Iodine has been recognized as a single, or I should say, really mental retardation in children. They call cretinism has iodine at its foundation. And it is said that mental retardation is one of the single most preventable diseases just with supplementation of iodine alone. And so there is a very, very strong link between iodine and uh, the expectant mother and her fetus's intellect, hinging upon iodine. So, so anyway, let's move on. I want to jump back to iodine as an element and where we find it. So many people know that iodine is a mineral that is in the soil. However, its presence is not abundant. It's not abundant, and there are even parts of the world. I just specifically say here in the United States, the Upper Midwest, what we call the Great Lakes area around Michigan, Wisconsin, Indiana. It has been discovered that those soils are very deficient in iodine, and um, and where we usually find iodine is in the waters, in the oceans. And you know, when you go to the ocean and you smell that, that really nice fishy smell, and there may be algae present, that iodine is also present. The sea vegetables are loaded with iodine. The fish have that same fishy smell because they're eating these planktons and algae that are in the water, and it's simply because they have ingested all the seaweed and other vegetables, but the vegetables are loaded with iodine. So iodine kind of has a distinctive smell even in the ocean, and that's where we find it mostly. So I have my theory about why the oceans are so plentiful with iodine, and why we seemingly don't have an abundance of it in our soil. And this is just my theory, is that the floods that came some 4,000 years ago and caused the world to fill up with water, um, eventually that water, the Bible tells us, receded. After reaching the peaks and the tops of mountains, it receded to the valleys, and then it rested all or came all the way down, the floods that is, and washed a lot of minerals out to sea, out to the ocean. And my belief is that iodine was one of those. And the reason I believe it is because iodine is a very heavy mineral with respect to itself and the other elements in the uh, on the table, the periodic table, and that it likely washed right on out to the ocean and those waters and bodies of water, uh, just like the water itself. And therefore, now we have this seeming depletion, if you will, of iodine, and that's why the oceans are so rich in iodine. So, anyway, that's just my little theory. So, um, iodine is a very necessary part of our diet. Um, so, why do we need iodine? I just mentioned a few benefits for iodine, but I'm going to mention here before we get into detoxing a few things that I have discovered some time ago, and that is that one of the main hormones of the thyroid is iodine. Or I should say, I'm sorry, that one of the main minerals that the thyroid uses is iodine. And why does it need iodine? Well, it needs iodine along with some other macronutrients like selenium. Um, it needs it to produce a very special hormone called triiodothyronine. So we recognize that as T3 in the medical community, and triiodothyronine is the active form of iodine that is used in the body. And so we have inactive forms, and these inactive forms are like T4, which they call thyroxine. Uh, it is produced right there in the thyroid, but it needs iodine. And then after the pituitary gland, the pituitary gland sends sends a signal via thyroid hormone to tell the thyroid to produce more thyroxine. Then that thyroxine is sent down to the liver and converted to the active form that we know of as triiodothyronine. So there's also T1 and T2. They are lesser forms of like a thyroxine, but they function uh, in some ways nearly the same as T4, but they are several orders of magnitude smaller in their effect on um, on the production of triiodothyronine T3. So um, let's just talk for a minute about these sources of iodine. So we mentioned before that um, one source of iodine is the ocean, and the ocean happens to be a very, very uh, vulnerable yet super critical part of the ecosystem. And it has these uh, vegetables that range from microscopic to macroscopic, and they store iodine. And therefore, one of the greatest sources of iodine would be sea vegetables. I really enjoy what they call uh, nori, sushi nori, and I don't eat the fish part of it, the raw fish, but you can have these nice vegetable nori rolls that are rolled up in these nori wraps, and so the nori wrap is just part of this sea vegetable. There's wakame, dulse, and so forth, and then we can also find iodine in supplements. So you may ask, why supplement? Why would I need to supplement from iodine? Well, it is a fact that unfortunately many people are deficient of iodine in this country for sure. Back in the 30s, or I should say prior to maybe the 1930s, in this country, breads, or specifically flour and milk, were sterilized with iodine. So iodine was used as a medium to make food safe. Well, iodine happened to be displaced and substituted with bromine. And so now we find a lot of brominated flour, we find bromine products and a lot of things. And it's kind of unfortunate because bromine that we know of, and uh, I'm just going to mention fluorine, have no purpose that we know of specifically in the body. We don't see a beneficial purpose. Um, and it may be discovered sometime later, but the present thinking, at least in the natural world, is that it actually adds a burden to the body. So bromine, fluorine, and so forth, um, because they are halogens, they belong to the same group of elements on the periodic table, where they each try to steal, if you will, another electron to become more stable. They also, in the body and in the thyroid, compete with one another. And so the presence of bromine and specifically fluorine uh, tend to usurp, if you will, the position of iodine on the thyroid receptors. And so the thyroid receptors, because of the abundance of these other atoms in our body, uh, tend to grab hold to uh, the like I said, the fluorine and bromine, and as a result, we end up not being able to utilize the iodine. And um, so this presents a need to detox, if you will, from some of these chemicals. So I'll just move on here now and mention that um, sea salt has been, or not sea salt, let me back up for just a moment. Um, Table salt, regular table salt, has been uh, in the place of iodine in our flour and milk been put into the salt. And so 1 teaspoon of regular salt, table salt, contains some, I can round off, 2,300 uh, milligrams of sodium chloride, or actually sodium itself. And so with that sodium, um, there is the, what we would say over here, supplemented amount of iodine added, and that iodine comes at about, get my numbers straight here in my head, uh, it comes in the amount of about 260 plus micrograms, and the RDA for iodine is 150 micrograms. But what I'd like to share that's super important, if you don't take anything else away from this presentation, is that iodine in the amount of the RDA is just enough to prevent goiter and cretinism. And that those basically are diseases. And goiter, we know, is where the thyroid tends to develop this Adam's apple and it swells up and gets very large. And then the cretinism is the mental retardation. So unfortunately, even with the supplementation of iodine, um, the 260 plus micrograms is not enough for optimal health. Now, the RDA is 150 micrograms per day, but again, um, per doctors Guy Abram and David Brownstein and many others, optimal health again cannot be achieved on such a minuscule amount. In fact, when we look at the Japanese, there were several studies done, and many authors have written about it. Dr. Abrams was one individual who studied Japanese. We find that on average, they consume anywhere from about 12 and a half milligrams of of iodine a day, 12.5 to about 13.8 milligrams of vitamin D, excuse me, I keep wanting to use vitamin D, iodine per day. And so that's kind of a far cry when you compare. We compare this to the measly 150 micrograms that is being recommended for each of us. In fact, um, it is it is some 50. It could be somewhere between 50 and 100 times less iodine than what we need per day. Um, so there is a great need for iodine. Um, Supplementation wise, Celtic sea salt, one of these really beautiful greenish salts, that green, kind of bluish green color, kind of signals the presence of magnesium, but it's also a really good source of iodine. It's not going to be as strong as just eating the sea vegetables itself, but it nonetheless still has iodine present. So that's another thing that one could use. Another problem, again, with these deficiencies is that we have been preached to for so long by the various medical communities that we need to limit our intake of salt. And to a degree, a major degree, that is correct because sodium is part of a body system um, called a angiotensin converting enzyme system that helps to regulate the water balance of fluids in our bodies. And so too much sodium can certainly lead to excess fluid, and then these excess fluids tend to cause pressure on the blood vessels, and they end up raising blood pressure. And so, with all due respect, certainly we need to limit it. But one issue is that if individuals were expecting to receive enough iodine from the table salt, they would be mistaken. So again, we said the RDA for salt is about 1 teaspoon. That's the equivalent of about 2,300 milligrams. And out of that, an individual will get some uh, 260 plus micrograms of iodine if it was a supplemented salt. So unfortunately, 70% of salts are not even iodized. That means they're not even supplemented with iodine. And then, because iodine also competes with chlorides, right? And then they put it in the same mixture, you're only going to absorb, per Dr. Brownstein, maybe 10% of the iodine that's even in the table salt. So it kind of presents a dilemma for people who believe they may be getting enough iodine, and in fact, they're not getting as much iodine as they really need. So, iodine, what can we do with it? If you believe that you have a deficiency, one is you can begin eating more sea veggies and just simply, you know, boost up those foods that have it naturally. I didn't mention this earlier, but one telltale sign for many individuals who have a deficiency is the outer third of their eyebrows will be clean, very clean, as in no hair on those outer third of the eyebrow. So many people have a nice full eyebrow profile, but then you look at the outer third, and then you'll see that there's no hair growing, and that many times is a telltale sign of a deficiency. And as I was talking to Miss Eva Steen, that even individuals who might rub some iodine on their skin, the longer it stays indicates that a person perhaps isn't as deficient as they might think. But then, if it disappears fairly rapidly, then there is a deficiency present. Um, so there is a way to test how deficient one is in iodine, and they call it the iodine loading test. And what one can do is they can consume a large amount of iodine, anywhere from 50 to 100 uh, milligrams of iodine, using either Lugol solution. This would be like a 2% iodine, 4% iodide uh, Lugol solution. And if you were to put that in water and drink it, it would be excreted, which iodine is, through the urine. And they call this the iodine loading test. And so if a person were to ingest 100 milligrams of iodine And then their urine output was sampled and measured for about a week. Then individuals, lab professionals, could determine how much iodine was coming out, and the amount that comes out is that which is excess. The amount that stays is how deficient one is. So again, if one, let's just say, for example, ingested 100 milligrams of iodine, and then they ended up urinating out only 1%, then that would mean the individual was 99% deficient in iodine. So that's just one way that the deficiency can be measured scientifically. And so, um, what does iodine do in addition to support our thyroid? Well, iodine can do a lot of wonderful things, and we mentioned the benefits of it earlier. There are also deficiencies, which can be nearly the opposite of those benefits. But one issue that we face is the accumulation of metals in our body. Um, Iodine happens to be a very unique mineral. It's got these very special properties, and it can displace bromine and fluorine, and not just displace them, but cause them to be excreted from the body, along with other heavy metals such as mercury and cadmium and lead. And so its properties are suited for that. And unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, because we have consumed so much of these other minerals like fluorine, which is in our drinking water here in America, we even have chlorine in the drinking water. Um, that iodine can actually displace these uh, these elements, and along with some of these heavy metals. And so that's really good news because these heavy metals are thought to largely uh, be a foundational problem for autoimmune diseases. Not the only one, but they're thought to play a part in autoimmune diseases. So it's been studied that when inducing an autoimmune, let's just say a thyroid autoimmune disorder, that the uh, that the ability to do so cannot be performed unless a person is iodine deficient. So I just say that one more time, that in studying these autoimmune disorders, uh, it cannot be induced, that is a thyroid autoimmune disorder, unless an individual is is iodine deficient. Um, so um, so anyway, this ability to detox and especially to purge these heavy metals really has significance. I don't know about other parts of the world, but here um, the dental establishments still use what we call mercury fillings, or really silver amalgam fillings, is what they call them, but they contain some 50+% mercury. And mercury is, unfortunately, in the medical world, an element that is considered to be harmful, but in the dental world, it's not. And so it kind of presents challenges for individuals who may have lots of these fillings in their mouths. And there's some pretty unique studies that have been done, but um, it's been shown that mercury does leach from these fillings. And there's some pretty cool videos. They use some infrared uh, technology to show the vapors of mercury coming off of some of these dental fillings that an individual may have in their mouth. So when you add up all of the fillings and the amounts of mercury that could be spewed for years, and let's just say, one times maybe 20 years, then an individual could have quite a bit of mercury in their mouths. We didn't talk about toothpaste, but switching over from mercury to fluorine and fluorides, our toothpaste here in America are heavily fluorinated, and it is used as the uh, prime protective of tooth enamel. So there's a lot of debate still over how effective it really is, But the bottom line is it is being used very, very widely. And so nearly, every human being that uses regular toothpaste is going to have even ingestion of fluorine and fluorides just from the toothpaste alone. And so using iodine to purge, if you will, these metals as well as halogens is a boon. It's a boon. So you may ask, what types of iodine can we use if a person was curious to help either detox their body or to um, help with a thyroid condition? So number one, if you do have a thyroid condition, I strongly recommend that you consult your physician. And the information that you're receiving is not meant to treat your medical condition, but you should always consult and get tests and get consultation and inform your doctor of what you're doing. Your doctor may learn something, and that would be very, very good. And so anyway, we didn't mention it earlier, but um, Dr. Brownstein, I'm just deviating just for a moment, then we're going to come back to iodine and the types that we can use to supplement with. But Dr. Brownstein and Abrams, Dr. Brownstein is a family physician here in the States. He and Guy Abrams did lots of studies. They shared a lot of data, collaborated, and they found that many women who were experiencing thyroid conditions, um, of course, would be supplemented with synthetic thyroxines and synthetic um, triiodothyronine. But at the root of the problem, they discovered that many of these women and even men who had thyroid conditions were simply iodine deficient. So the protocol would just simply be to prescribe uh, a synthetic hormone. But what they discovered was at the root of the problem simply that many of these women needed to supplement, and men, with iodine. And after they began supplementation with a couple of forms, one is Lugol solution, another one is called Iodoral. Lugol is a liquid, Iodoral is more of a tablet. That these women began to get better. They found that the mental fog cleared. They found that the people were not as sluggish. Um, it stepped up their metabolism a bit, and then they surprisingly found that even these uterine fibroids started going away. They found that the cyst in the breast started going away, and and then not. I have to add this. This is just on my own observation. Is that an individual I knew who began supplementing with it had a thyroid nodule at the beginning, and then the nodule went away after supplementation. And this was over the course of 2 months or so. Um, so those are two forms, Lugol's and Iodoral. You may be asking about amounts. So again, optimal health would not be considered uh, to be gained through the recommended daily allowance for this iodine. In fact, many healthcare, well, I should say, many natural healthcare professionals and even some medical doctors, there's a book called The Remington Science and Practice of Pharmacy, which said that physicians uh, up through the late 90s were still recommending as much as 6 to 180 milligrams of iodine for supplementation. And then even Dr. Brownstein recommends some uh, 50 to 60 milligrams, and these are per day, of iodine. So one can get tested. But if you were just simply looking to supplement iodine, it seems based on the Japanese that the amount might be about 12.5 milligrams per day. If you are using the Lugol solution, that would be about 5 drops because each drop of 2% is 2.5 milligrams. And then it has also been said that if you drop a pinch of salt into the iodine, that it will actually accelerate the release of bromine and fluorine from the body. And and then one should also know that sometimes when this happens, individuals may experience what's called the Herxheimer's effect. And this effect was named after a gentleman, Mr. Herxheimer, who discovered that the body may experience flu-like symptoms, cold-like symptoms, vomiting, nausea, diarrhea, nasal congestion, even fever. It's like a person's getting sick, but their body's working to purge these elements. And if the effect is too strong, then it's just recommended that a person back off of their dose. So if they were taking to detox, let's say 50 milligrams per day for uh, about 3 to 4 weeks, then they would back off. They would back off in a stepwise fashion, maybe by 10 milligrams per week. So they'd be stepping it down from 50 to 40, 50 after a few weeks to 40, the next week to 30 to 20, and then all the way down to 12.5. And that would be a orderly way to step the iodine down. And then after that, it would be recommended to simply, um, instead of consuming the iodine every day, to give the body about 4 to 5 days on with iodine, 4 to 5 days off, and so forth. I do want to mention a word of caution here in regards to iodine. I maybe should have stated this at the beginning, but iodine is not suited for every individual when it comes to supplementation. And the reason is because some individuals do have an allergy to iodine. And such individuals might be those with Hashimoto's disease. Hashimoto's affects about 1% of the population and most of Eastern European descent. And so individuals with that disorder might find that if they consume iodine in such a large dose that it might start to attack their thyroid itself, and you would actually feel that attacking going on. And so one should be very careful if they have never supplemented with iodine to first try it on your skin and see how your body reacts to it. Just a drop, one drop on the skin, on the arm or the hand, and then a couple of drops in water. And once you find out for sure after several days, maybe a week, let's just say a week, of supplementing with 2.5 milligrams, that's one drop, um, and then maybe two drops. I would say just one drop per day for a week. Then they could go for that the higher dose after they know that they have no allergies to it. So uh, individuals many times can have these allergies even when consuming soy and these supplemental forms of iodine, simply because um, these foods mimic iodine, and they can cause the thyroid to basically attack itself, or antibodies, that is, from the immune system to attack the thyroid. So be very careful if you do decide you would like to supplement with iodine, and seek some professional advice too if you're really uncertain about what you're doing, and that's provided that you would like to do it. So that's all I was wanted to share with you today. I hope you were able to take something from it. The beautiful thing about sharing is that we can all research. You don't have to take my word for it. You can also look up these doctors. You can do your own research and just see what you can learn. I find this subject very fascinating, and I noticed when I started supplementing with iodine that my eyebrows, that is, started growing back on the corners of my head, if you will, the outer third, and after a while, I noticed that there is a bit of mental clarity that came with it, but it may take a while for some people, depending on how much of these metals one has in their body. So anyway, God bless you all, and I hope that you are able to again take something from this presentation.
Thank you so much, Kurt. I was really learning very much, and I have lots of questions for you.
Okay.
So, yeah, I was trying to notice as you were speaking. You were saying that this iodine have very large molecules. So, is there something? Is this easy to absorb, or is there something we can do which hinders absorption? Now you said that
Well,
salt can actually help the absorption.
right. So actually, so what one can do, because iodine belongs to this group called the halogens, what one can do is be sure to supplement away from consuming salt and other elements that might have chlorine in them, or and hopefully one doesn't consume fluorine. Um, just just consuming the iodine by itself would be a big step toward absorbing more of it. So the salt, the one thing that the little pinch of salt does, a small pinch of salt, is it accelerates the release of the bromine and fluorine. Um, I'm not sure of the exact mechanism for which it does it, but it has been noted that it can actually speed it up. I don't believe that it is actually making it more absorbable, but it certainly increases the number of good guys versus the bad guys. Bad guys being the fluorine and the bromine, and the better guys being the chloride and the iodine. So the body does need, it does need chlorine. Chloride, that not chlorine. Chlorine is a molecule, right? There's two chlorine molecules. Chloride is an ion, right, or an anion because of its negative charge. So we need the chloride. The heart needs it. It's an electrolyte. Um, so anyway, I'm not sure if that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. And here I have a bottle of Lugos iodine,
Oh
which many
yes,
people probably have seen. Let's see there. And when I
neat.
bought it, it was 15%, but now it's very hard to get more than 2%. Why haven't they
Yes, it
taken the
is.
15% away? And why is 15% better?
Good question. So, it was found here, it used to be found here decades ago in higher concentrations, but I do believe that 15% is the limit. And I have even heard that even when you purchase those amounts, you could be tracked. You could be tracked for the 15%. But it only takes one incident to uh, you know, cause authorities to blame, if you will, iodine, and not just iodine, but other very, very important minerals for the body, or even supplements. It only takes one incident for someone to say, hey, that's not safe. So if a person experienced a reaction and that reaction nearly caused their death or caused an uproar, if you will, in the community, then it could be targeted to have greater controls put on it. And it's not that the iodine itself would harm a person, let's say permanently harm an individual, but it's just, in my opinion, that um, it was probably already in the wings uh, and waiting for some opportunity to be controlled.
Right, right. What helps they try to control, right? Sorry.
Yes.
So I'm one of the persons who react very easily to electrical waves, and you were talking about that iodine actually protect against radiation. Would you say that the
Hmm.
person with, who are very sensitive to electrical waves, that they should really think about taking some kind of supplement with iodine?
Sensitive to electrical waves. That's very interesting. Certainly, iodine has that radioactive, or I should say, radioactive protection component to it. But I haven't specifically researched that aspect of it. Certainly today, we are inundated with electromagnetism all around us. I mean, we have electricity, we have the power plants, we have the big transformers, the power lines. and now we have Wi-Fi, and now we have 5G, and I mean, it just goes, the list goes on and on and on. But I would just have to say, based on the general principle uh, that a person can be helped in the case of, just radiation in general. And what is radiation? It's just in most cases, just a higher frequency of electrical waves that perhaps, and I'm just stepping out on a limb, perhaps there could be some benefit, but we really would need to do some research to determine, whether it has actually been seen, a protection or benefit gained, you know, from this sensitivity with electrical waves.
Thank you. And then my next question is a thought which came to me now. If a person have gone through chemotherapy, I'm thinking about radiation, would that be a benefit?
Yes, yes, indeed. And there are some articles out there. I don't have them up before me, but yes, there's some benefits in that iodine can help lessen the side effects of the radiation and even the chemicals that individuals may be using as a part of their therapy. But yes,
Yeah, and you were talking about hair loss. So, I mean, many people who are taking chemotherapy, they are losing their hair, right? So,
yes. Uh,
so you were
mhm.
talking about that iodine is antiseptic and that you can use it on wounds. How are you doing that? Are you taking it straight on as drops, or are you adding it with some herbs, or how are you doing it?
So I don't use, well, I today don't necessarily use the iodine so much for burns. Um, I think there are other elements out there that are just as effective, but uh, just because of the expense, there's some other ones, some other good ones. But yes, in the past and even the present, there are still people that use iodine in this way, and it's just applied straight. It's not diluted, just applied straight, and the burn shouldn't be any greater than isopropyl alcohol on a wound.
Okay. Yeah, and so have you seen anyone? I mean, many women have very much menstrual pain. Have you seen
Hmm.
that people who have started to use iodine actually can get less pain?
So that's an interesting question. I, I cannot say I have specifically correlated it to that, although we do know that fibroids, let's just take the case of uterine fibroids, can be fairly painful when women develop a lot of them. Um, they're getting pain, from receptors nearby, even referral, other organs pressing on the uterus, and it makes it hurt. And so by deduction, um, as their condition improves, I don't think it would be far fetched, but I don't have the data or the science in front of me, but I don't think it would be far fetched to say that over time, if those fibroids started shrinking or the cyst in the breast started shrinking, that um, the pain would also be reduced a bit.
Thank you. And we also know that many women, they have difficulties getting pregnant today. You were talking about that maybe iodine even could help those couples.
So I have seen, yes, and even in the case of men as well, men, male sterility, I have read that iodine does play a factor in uh, making the sperm uh, more resilient, motile, etc. But but yes, it does play an important part in reproductive health.
Hmm. Thank you. You were talking about that iodine is important for making T4, right?
Yes.
And then I have heard that if you have liver problems, the liver don't manage to um, make convert the T4 into T3, so the body
Right.
can use it. So,
Hmm.
well, that's probably another topic. But what can be done to the liver to make it manage to, you know, convert it to from T4 to T3? I don't know if
Yes,
you have
that's
looked into that.
that's a loaded, pretty loaded question. So yes, there is an enzyme. I don't have all the answers, so I will have to. I'll just have to stop where I can here. But yeah, there is an enzyme that is responsible for that conversion, and unfortunately, there are people who do absolutely do have this problem. All I could do is just suggest that these individuals, you know, maybe go on a detox, for their liver, just to try to improve the function of their liver. If a person's drinking alcohol, please stop. Person is consuming substances like high fructose corn syrup, um, just these substances that induce injury to the liver, to just uh, just, if you want to call it, abstain abstain from them, and consider um, doing some type of liver cleanse. It has been said that grapes are one of the natural cleansers of the body, period, for the blood, but also have a very potent effect, even in the liver all by itself. Um, and it could be because of um, the anthocyanidins that are in there. There are so many wonderful um, antioxidant compounds in grapes and the seeds that you know the hope would be to maybe correct the liver,
Right,
feed the liver, and
right.
so that's all without you know right now, without a little more research. I can at least offer that.
Yeah, thank you. And I also know that you have also somehow discovered a way to make a special solution with iodine, which people can nebulize if people have, something in their lungs. Can you please share how are you making it? How much? I think you are using probably hydrogen peroxide beside iodine and water. Is that what you are using?
That is correct. If a person wants to make it, they could certainly make it themselves. So I will have to say that there is controversy with doing this, not necessarily because it's harmful, just because it's not an accepted practice, if you will, for helping one clear their lungs and to kill viruses and bacteria and so forth. But so I'll put that caution out there that a person is going to do this at their own risk, but it has helped a lot of people. And what one would do is just simply mix food grade hydrogen peroxide with distilled water, and add this iodine to the mixture. And uh, there are a few medical doctors who tell us that even, and this is not for everyone. I will have to say that it's not for everyone, and of course, you'll still want to consult your physician if you have doubts and just questions on how this works in the body. But there are some that believe that inhaling even 12% just on a short-term basis, we're not talking about weeks and months, we're just talking about days, is not harmful and actually has many benefits for the body. But so that's 12%. But what I'm actually speaking of, or have done myself, is 3%. And so one could make up a little solution uh, of food grade hydrogen peroxide. Food grade is kind of important because of the absence of chemical stabilizers. So let's just say um, 30 milliliters of this would be maybe enough for 2 ounces. 30 milliliters of distilled water, um, 30 milliliters of, oh, actually, let me back up. Sorry, I did miss one thing here, the saline solution. So I said distilled water, but really it's a saline solution. Um, but so the formula would be 30 milliliters of a saline solution with 30 milliliters of 3% hydrogen peroxide with about 10 drops of Lugol solution, and this is a 2% Lugol solution.
Mm.
So that may that may be considered a very, very strong hydrogen peroxide mixture. After it's diluted, it becomes a little less than 1.5%. So so it gets cut down a little bit, um, but um, but it still has some pretty interesting effects on the body. So again, I just have to stress that this may not be for everyone. So if you want to try this, you try it at your own risk.
Right. Last question. Here I have kelp powder.
Oh yes,
And I wonder if you don't use the iodine drops and people have this iodine powder, how much would you say that they should use every day? I mean, as you're saying over and over again, it's not for everyone, but for probably most people.
yes, probably most people. So it really depends on the amount of iodine present in the kelp. Um, I don't recall what the amount present is, but um, there's no harm in starting off small. Probably a teaspoon or so, half a teaspoon to a teaspoon of water, and drink that every day. Now, kelp is super super healthy. I mean, there are other minerals present. I remember even using it to water my garden with sometimes, but
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of expensive too. Um, but you might find that if you were to ratchet up the amount of kelp that you put into your water or sprinkle on your food to 12.5 milligrams, that you might end up using quite a bit of your kelp. So, and it may not be necessary being in food form to even consume that much. One may not even need that much. You know what I mean? Just because it's already in a natural form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you. I have learned much, and I hope that our viewers also have learned much. I believe so. So, yeah, I think it's such a blessing to know that the Lord has given us this natural. I mean, we should call it
Amen.
a natural therapy, right? It's a mineral, as you were saying, and
Absolutely.
way to cleanse. And I don't think most people know that we know that iodine is important, but not as important as you have been sharing with us. So yeah, thank you so much. And
You're very
maybe
welcome.
maybe I can ask you if you please can have a closing prayer with us.
Oh, absolutely. Sure. Father in heaven, we just want to thank you so much for this opportunity to discover much in the scientific world, Father. Even if we had not discovered it there, we're so grateful for your holy word that tells us that it is important, and not only important but a blessing to be in health, so that our spiritual uh, inner being may prosper. Father, I pray that those individuals who are suffering with ailments may find relief from their ailments. I pray, Heavenly Father, for those who are wondering how they can uh, ameliorate their conditions, may find the answers. I pray that you would relieve, dear Father, the stress that many feel uh, and the other burdens, dear Father, of society that come along with these health conditions and stresses. Thank you for giving us the ability to find this research, dear Father. Thank you for allowing us to be able to even find supplements and various foods that can help us to live and be healthy. And improve our conditions. So I pray that you would bless the viewers, Heavenly Father. I pray that you would give joy and happiness to each of us, and that we may, above all, realize that we have the greatest gift of all, and that is Jesus Christ and the knowledge that he
Mhm,
imparts to us.
mhm.
Thank you for hearing our prayer and our words. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, and we are looking
Oh, you're
forward
very
for the
welcome.
next program with you because I hope that we soon will see you again. And thank you to our viewers. I have the hope that you will have learn much today again, and see you next time.
See you next time.